How you guys doing? Been a while. I know. Been kind of traveling all over the place and then moving and I got sick. So unfortunately, I missed a couple of weeks. My name is Indu Scott. I'm your gracious host for Sideline NFL Edition. And this week we got week 9 and there are a lot of games to talk about. Actually, not more games than usual because I don't have as much time. But we got some interesting games coming up in the NFL week 9 in review. Let's see what those games are and we'll be right back. Well, there have been some major trades that began this in week 9. Actually, they started in week 8 and then they continued throughout week 9. Actually, some trades actually happened as early as week 6. So just like Joe Flacco was traded to the Bengals from the Browns, apparently it wasn't working out, but now he's throwing bombs all over the place. So he's showing how he has a really big arm with the Bengals and what he can do with the weapons there. So those trades happened and the league has begun its trades, and the Jets also traded their season away, traded all their key players, and you'll see more about it in our first topic. And Lamar and Henry go windsurfing in Miami. We'll find out all about that during the show. Then Christian McCaffrey finally runs for 100 yards in the game. I know he ran it maybe 2 weeks ago, but it's not like Christian McCaffrey. But he finally runs for 100 yards in a game. And the New York Giants, who are not acting so giants, gave up 200 yards on the ground. Again, as usual, I don't know what's happening with that team. Vikings raid Detroit for a win. Like that fun? You know. And yes, I'm a geek. And Steelers stole one in the Midwest. And you'll find out. Don't worry. The Panthers did the Rico Dahl show in Green Bay. You'll find out what that means. Exactly. And James Cook ran all over the Chiefs in Buffalo. And you know what? Such a glorious game. You'll find out more details about that during the show. And the Arizona Cardinals benched Kyler Murray, finally. And they might have saved their season by just benching Kyler Murray. You'll find out more details in NFL Sideline as usual during the show. I'll explain everything that you need to know. If there's anything I don't explain, you can yell at me for now. But we'll be right back and we'll get into the show. We're back. Again, my name is Indu Scott. This is Sideline NFL Edition Week 9 in review. We're going to look at some of the trades that happened. Specifically, we're going to focus on the Jets. Like I said before, there were some trades that happened as far back as week 5 or 6 when Joe Flacco was traded to the Bengals from the Browns. Apparently wasn't working out. He was throwing too many picks. He's still throwing a few picks here and there, but he's also throwing bombs, and I mean touchdowns. He's killing it with the Bengals, throwing like 300 yards average per game, because he has a lot more weapons there. But let's focus on the Jets and why their trades have kind of shown that they're giving up on their season. So the Jets, they have basically punted on the season, on Aaron Glenn's first season. Aaron Glenn's a first-time coach. They hired at the beginning of the season. They thought that they would have a more defensively strong team because Aaron Glenn's specialty is defense. But now they've traded away some of their key defensive assets in cornerback Sauce Gardner and also D-tackle Quentin Williams. And these two guys were big-time first-rounders a couple of years ago, and they were part of the core of the Jets defensive team from like 4 years back, right? And these guys were supposed to be part of the nucleus of the team to make them play a lot better on defense and be much more of an effective defensive team. And for a couple of years, they actually were. Now, Sauce Gardner has been traded to the Colts. I believe he was traded for a first round. You know what? Don't quote me, but it was like between first and second. I don't know why I don't have it. But the Colts needed somebody to kind of help because they're going for a deep playoff run. The Colts needed somebody who was going to kind of like bolster their defensive back because they've been kind of loose and leaky in the defensive backfield, and they have a decent pass rush, but I think they just needed some guys who are going to hold the defensive backfield up. So you get pressure through having a good defensive backfield where you're able to hold the receivers at bay while your defensive linemen are able to then have more time to generate pressure against the offensive line. So the Colts needed Sauce Gardner, and I think he's going to do a pretty good job boosting their defense for the season. And then the Cowboys picked up Quentin Williams, who's a excellent D tackle, and they brought him in, to bolster their run defense. And I think in the beginning of the season, I was criticizing Jerry Jones for all the dumb things he was doing by trading Micah Parsons, but I think actually I kind of see where he's going with this, and I did leave room for the fact that they could change some of those Micah Parsons picks that they got from Green Bay, those first round picks they got from Green Bay, and then turn them to pretty good assets. So Quentin Williams is now going to be a Cowboy. He's not playing this week, but I think he'll play like next week on the 10th week or 11th of the season. And I think he's going to be a pretty good asset to them. So watch out for them Cowboys. They seem to be coming back, right? And the Jets are basically signaling that this is a rebuild for them now. So from here on out, they might still trade some more players at the end of the season, but from here on out, they're going to be looking to do a little bit of a rebuild. So we'll see. We'll watch out what they're going to do, and they're going to just stack picks up right now for the draft or use it to premium veteran players for next year. So that's it. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the Ravens versus the Dolphins. Like I said, the Ravens went into Miami. We're surfing for a win. Got it. So watch out for that. Be right back. All right, we're back. NFL Sideline. So next game we're looking at is the Ravens versus the Dolphins. So here are some of the key storylines going in to this game for the Ravens mainly, and then also for the Dolphins. So for the Ravens, Lamar is back. He was injured a few weeks ago. He was out for a couple of weeks, I think like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that. And while he was out, the team really struggled. And one of the highlights of that was their 44-10 loss to the Texans. Now, the Texans are a decent team, but they shouldn't have lost. The Ravens are also a pretty good team. In fact, they had the top roster at the beginning of this season, like the top 2 roster at the beginning of the season. So they shouldn't have lost by 44-10, even if Lamar's not there. So, but anyways, they've been playing a little bit better these last couple of weeks, and then Lamar got back last week. And so they got a win against the Bears in week 8, and they won 30-16. So it was a pretty convincing win. Seems like they got their form back. And, football is complementary. So if the offense is playing well, defense also plays well, that helps the team, post wins. You got to play offense and defense to win the game. So now they're looking to have a run of form to actually make the playoffs. And it's not coming, it can come at a better time. We're at the halfway point of the season at this point. At week 8, we were at the halfway point of the season, basically, but now we're definitely at the halfway point because there's 17 games. And so Lamar coming in now, they have a very little margin of error, and they're looking to win as many games as possible, and they're pissed. So what I think is that their conference is really weak. They're in a conference with Pittsburgh Steelers, the Bengals, and the Browns. The Browns are not doing anything this season. The Bengals are a little bit iffy, even though they have Joe Flacco. They could be spoilers. However, if the Ravens just play their game, they probably still have a pretty good. They know they have a pretty good chance to get in the playoffs. So that's the storyline for the Ravens. The storyline for the Dolphins is funny. They've punted on the season. They fired their general manager, Chris Greer, who's been there for 8 years. They fired him, I believe it was last week or week 7. They fired him pretty recently, and that tells you that they're no longer going on with the Chris Greer project. And this project, as it is right now, is Chris Greer's project. And they also traded away the edge rusher, Jalen Phillips, who actually, I think they got him as a late number 1 or early number 2 pick a couple of years ago, I think 3-4 years ago. And he's been pretty good. He's posted 2 seasons with double sacks, and that's pretty good as an edge rusher. And I think he's only been in the league for about 4 years. So he's a pretty young edge rusher, and they traded him away to the Eagles for a early number 3 pick. And the Eagles are trying to stack up players because they're trying to add depth to their team because they want to make a run this year and also next year. So Ryan Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, knows what he's doing. So the Dolphins are likely also to trade more players as the season goes. And they're pretty much punting on this season. And if they lose really badly in week 10, they might fire. There's talk of them firing their coach before the season ends. That's Mike McDaniel. He's also on the hot seat. And then Tua Tagovailoa is also a storyline. So he's playing his butt off. At least he's trying to put the team on his back. But also I think that there's a lot of pressure because he got, and he's a good guy, to be honest. He's a pretty fairly honorable guy. I think the way he approaches these, appreciative of the contract that the Dolphins gave him. And so I think he's trying to play his butt off right now and put the team on his back. He got a contract 2 years ago for $212 million, right? And last year was a disaster year because he was injured. So he's trying to show people that he can play. And I think that's what you want to do as a professional because even if you're still not on the contract and you're no longer going to be with that team, he does have 2.5 years left on his contract, and he has 70% of that contract guaranteed, right? The way he looks at it is even if he's not playing there anymore, he's going to want to put out his best work so that the next team he goes to can be a favorable situation. Now, the Dolphins, this is a storyline. The Dolphins can get rid of Tua after June 1st, 2026, so like June 2nd, 2026, and they wouldn't have to eat all that dead money. If they decided to cut him before then, they would have to pay him something like $80 million or something like that. Or they would they would owe him $80 million of dead money. That's what they call dead money because that's money that you shouldn't have paid if you just let the player run out his contract. So if they cut him on June 2026, June 2nd, 2026, they can avoid eating that of paying him that $80+ million, right? Of what's left over for his contract. They'll pay him something else, but you don't have to pay him the $80 million. There's, I believe, you can, cut contracts, and then there's a penalty for cutting contracts early, but they wouldn't have to pay 80. So they pay something less, maybe like 40 million or something. So he was playing to get himself in a favorable landing spot, or still stay with the Dolphins. Who knows? That's what it's looking like. So he's playing his butt off in every game, and you see him kind of forcing things a lot because he's trying to put the team on his back, because he's trying to prove that he's worth the money that he was paid. So that's the story. So going into this game, those are the storylines for the two teams. Let's look at some of the key events. Let's look at the scores and the outcome of the game. You already know the Ravens won. The Ravens won this fairly comfortably. It was not a blowout, but it was 28-6, and it was at Miami, and they had control of the game most of the time. They ran the ball as usual. The duo of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson was a little too much for the Dolphins, who are already needy in defense. They have injuries, and then they traded some of their key assets, and they're already needy also on offense. Even though Jalen Waddle's making up for Tyreek Hill not being there, there's nothing like having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But Jalen Waddle's doing a good thing. They're still needy, but that's what it is. But yeah, Derrick Henry ran the ball all over them. I think he ran for 100+ yards. We'll look at the right stats later on. And then Tua is still having turnover issues. Like I said, he's trying to force a lot of things. He's putting himself under a lot of pressure, and he's also under a lot of pressure because he's supposed to be the leader of the team, and he's supposed to, with a contract like that, people expect you to do more things. And these contracts sometimes are not very fair, or the expectations on players isn't very fair because he didn't give himself that contract. I mean, he negotiated for it. His agent negotiated for it, but you pay the guy what you're going to pay the guy. So he's putting himself under a lot of pressure, and he threw a pick here, and he's thrown a lot of kicks, a lot of interceptions this season, more so than he usually would, because he was usually known to be very good with the ball and not, turning over the ball. So he did that this game, and the Dolphins pressured him a lot. Maybe not so much. I think they only got 2 sacks, but they were able to get him to throw a couple of incompletions and an interception. Now let's go to some of the key stats. The final score, like I said, Ravens was 28 and Dolphins was 6. Lamar passed the ball. He was 18 of 23 for 204 yards and 4 touchdowns. Pretty efficient for him. He didn't actually run the ball that much. Passed more. Tua Tagovailoa threw for 25 of 40 and 261 yards, and 1 interception, no touchdowns. They weren't able to score at all this game. I think the scores they had were basically just kicks. So that was one of the things. The Ravens defense is kind of stepping up a little bit. On the receiving end, Jalen Waddle is stepping up, filling the void for Tyreek Hill. 6 receptions for 82 yards. And then Zay Flowers from the Ravens had 5 receptions for 64 yards. And then Mark Andrews, efficient as always, showed himself to be that red zone threat. He had 2 receptions for 22 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really good for him. He did pretty well. And then our boy Derrick Henry, old man Henry, not really old, he's a young guy still, but in football age, he's old. 19 carries for 119 rushing yards. Very excellent. He was running all over the place. He's a big threat. And then the more you run the ball, the more you can gain yards. On the rushing the ball, the more you speed up the clock and the more you control the game. So it's important to run the ball. And I'll always say that. My thoughts on this game and what it means for the teams. My thoughts are Ravens dominated the game. Ravens came in, they're trying to start themselves. They want to build up that winning momentum and that winning rhythm. And so the Ravens did what they came in to do. They came in and they're building a 2-game win. And then, they're trying to see if they can stack up enough wins to get into the playoffs. And their conference is open. I mean, they have Pittsburgh Steelers are the main threat in their conference, but really that's the AFC North, I believe. That's the main threat. They can get to the playoffs. It's very realistic. Even though they're kind of behind the 8 ball, they only have 3 wins in total right now. They should have more than that, really, with the kind of roster they have. But stacking up some wins is good. Then the next one, they have their weekend opponent are the Vikings. They're at home. And that win, I would usually give that win to the Ravens, but Vikings are a bit unpredictable. They have a very good defense. They have an okay offense, and this really stems from the fact that they don't have the perfect quarterback situation. They thought they did with J.J. McCarthy in the beginning of the season, but he wasn't playing that well, and then he got injured, and then they asked him to sit down, and they brought in former Philly quarterback, but they brought him in, and he played pretty well, and then I think he got injured, and he came back, and he wasn't playing very well. And they brought back J.J. Abrams from the game. Now, J.J. Abrams had a win this week, and it depends what kind of Vikings team you see when you play, but I know that the Vikings defense are pretty good, and they are starting to play up, right? So beginning of the season, they weren't playing that well. They're starting to play up, and they're a pretty tough defense because they're coached by Brian Flores. That's the defensive coordinator, former head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So this is not going to be an easy win. Even if I'm thinking that the Ravens can win this game, it's not going to be an easy win. You don't know which Vikings offense is going to show up. If it's the really good Viking offense, it'll definitely be more difficult to beat them, and you have to bring in your game because they got Justin Jefferson and a whole bunch of different receivers, and now Aaron Jones is also back, so it makes it more difficult. They're more dynamic, but the key is how J.J. McCarthy plays, or what kind of game plan they put for J.J. McCarthy. And the key for the Ravens is the Ravens defense just has to step up. They have to show up for this game. Now, they could win. I predicted if they do win, it'll be by like maybe 1 to 3 points. It's going to be a very close game, even if the Vikings are not playing that well, because their defense is really good. All right, now for the Dolphins, what does this mean? This next game, it could be the head coach of the Dolphins. That's Mike McCarthy. It could be his swan song. He's not it could be his swan song if they play really badly, and they're playing against the Bills. So I think the Bills will win, and I believe it's in Miami. So Miami does have a chance to play up because they play fairly well usually at home. Most teams play fairly well with home field advantage. But if they don't play well and it's a blowout, they're going to fire Mike McDaniel. Or if not this game, the next they'll fire him. So it's really could be his swan song. But I predict they'll lose this game. Even if it's a close game, I predict they're going to lose. They could surprise me though. Let's see. Let's watch. So the next game we're going to look at is the 49ers versus the Giants. Be right back with that. This is Sideline NFL Edition 9 in review. I'm Andrew Scott. Come back and join. All right, we're down to our third topic or third game, essentially. Actually, it's the second game because the first topic was with the trades happening at the Jets. Again, this is Sideline. I'm Andrew Scott, in case you didn't know. I got to say it again. So 49ers at the Giants. Now, this game, I knew that the Giants were going to win because I'm a Giants fan, in case you don't know. I knew they were going to lose this game, but I hoped that they would fix some of their defensive issues. Let's see if they fixed it. Well, if you listen to my headlines, you know they didn't fix anything. So, anyways, here are the big storylines for this game. Will the Giants be able to stop the run at home and or upset the 49ers? You already know the answer to that. Can the 49ers bounce back after a loss against the Texans last week? Because that was not a surprise loss, and it was in Texas, so it's actually understandable that they lost against the Texans because the Texans are actually a pretty solid team. Their record is not representative of how good they are. They just had some bad wins early on, but they're a good team. Like they beat Baltimore 44-10. They're a solid team. So will the 49ers bounce back from that team? This is their get-right game to get back into the flow of winning because they have an easier schedule than most people and they need to capitalize on it to make the playoffs. And their conference, which is the NFC West, is very, very difficult. Next, big storyline. Does Brian Daboll or Joe Shane still know, not Joe Shane, Shane Bowen, that's the defensive coordinator. Do they still know how to coach? And can they teach Jackson Dart how to slide? The answer to all of that is no. They don't know. No, they don't know how to coach. They don't know how to teach Jackson Dart how to slide. So I'm already preempting you on that. Do the Giants really have any receivers that can step up? Maybe. Let's see. The Giants receivers, they can be so-so at times if it's not their lead receiver who's currently out for the season. And so the final score for this game was, no surprise, 49ers won 34-24. Actually a fairly close game, although the San Francisco 49ers controlled the game the whole way through because they just controlled the clock by running the ball. And then they passed the ball to their tight ends and also to the running backs from the backfield. So they were playing it pretty safe. They just wanted to get a win and they just ran the ball. I think they could have scored more points, but they were playing it fairly safe. However, let's look at how the game flow kind of went, right? So the Giants did score early. They've learned how to score. Problem is their defense. They scored early. Tight end Theo Johnson, I think he took an 11 or 15 yard. He had a 15-yard touchdown in the first quarter, early in the first quarter, and gave the G-men some hope that they could hang in this game. And it looked like they were going to hang in the first two outings of the offense. However, the 49ers said, no, we're the 49ers. We know how to win this game. We're just going to run the ball. So they just punched them back and scored immediately and scored in their next two offensive sessions. And they just ran the ball. The whole strategy was run the ball, control the clock. And they ran it. They just grounded the ball out. And Christian McCaffrey was the primary ball carrier. He actually also was the primary running back and receiver that touched the ball most of this game. And so he had a 100-yard rushing game. I think this is his second of the season, which is really poor for Christian McCaffrey. But I think they have some issues on their offensive line. They have an aging offensive line, and they have really young guys. It's not as good as it should be. And then obviously the Giants just don't know how to stop them. They spend all these assets to try to get defensive linemen to stop the run in the draft. Everything looked good, but they don't know how to. So I'm starting to think that it's not the players because they have good assets there. I think it's the system that Shane Bowen plays in. I think it just doesn't work with the personnel that he has. So I just don't think that it fits him. Anyway, yeah, Christian McCaffrey was a boss in this game, and he took it on himself, and he ran all over the place. And he also caught a receiving touchdown and then ran for a rushing touchdown. He was pretty good in this game. The Giants edge rushers are still pretty good. I think they got overall 2 sacks against the 49ers. They put a little bit of pressure on the quarterback, and that's why I said they were throwing the ball to the they were throwing short passes to the running backs and to the tight ends. So because they wanted to just get the ball out because they knew how much pressure the Giants could generate. However, the Giants still gave up 200 rushing yards. It was nuts. And then the week before that, in week 8, they gave 250 rushing yards up to the Eagles. And I think Saquon Barkley came in and got his revenge. He didn't come. The Giants went to the Eagles and he got his revenge. He said, Scadaboo, and by the way, Scadaboo's out, I think, for most of the season now. He got injured in that game versus the Eagles. And then they said, Scadaboo, we got Saquon. I had a chance for it, but they laid it out on The Eagles laid it out on the Giants that game. He ran for, I think, 150 or 160 yards last week. So the Giants' run defense is not good, and I think it's the system that Shane Bowen does. They got to figure that out. Hopefully he figures it out before the end of the season. Let's look at some key stats here. Passing, Mac Jones was 19 of 24 for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns. Very efficient. Jackson Dart was 24 of 33 for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also had 56 yards on the ground. That number, with the amount of times he threw the ball and the little he didn't have over 200 yards, it shows that he was throwing very short passes. So maybe he doesn't have enough time, or it has something to do with the route tree or the scheme that they're giving him. I don't know. It seemed like he had enough time. He wasn't overly. He was sacked 3 times, but he wasn't overly under pressure all the time. Their pass defense is better. Maybe it's just Jackson Dart's a rookie and he's still trying to figure his stuff out. It's very possible. This is his first season. So receiving stats, like I said, McCaffrey was the top receiver in his team. He caught 5 receptions for 67 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Juwan Jennings caught 4 receptions for 41 yards. Darius Slayton was the top receiver for the Giants. He caught 5 receptions for 62 yards, and Theo Johnson caught 3 receptions for 27 yards and a touchdown. Theo Johnson needs to work on his hands. There were 2 receivable balls that hit him right here in the chest, and he dropped them. He needs to work on his hands. He and Jackson Dart have a good connection. He cannot mess that up. So I think after he dropped those 2 balls, he stopped throwing the ball to him throughout the game. But he's a good tight end if he could just work on that, having a little bit more of sure hands. Then rushing stats, like I said, Christian McCaffrey ground the ball out. He really grounded out. He had 28 carries for 106 yards and 1 touchdown. And then the next really leading rusher in the game was Brian Robinson, who had 5 carries, 58 yards, and 1 touchdown. I think he had a 30-yard or 25-yard run to the end zone where he just bulldozed his way past Deontay Banks, and there was nobody who even touched him at the line of scrimmage. It was crazy. The Giants have a real problem. On the defensive side, well, I want to say this because Brian Burns is definitely a Pro Bowler this season. He's on pace to have maybe like 18 sacks this season. He had another sack this game. It's like every game it's sack town. And then I think Kayvon Thibodeau had a half a sack this game. The pass rushers are really actually doing pretty well in getting to the passer, but they can't stop the run to save their lives on defense. So, closing thoughts on this game. I've said what I need to say mostly about this game for the Giants. It was a disaster, essentially, or this season is a disaster, one giant disaster. It seems like they do have the toughest schedule in the NFL. So, I didn't expect it to be like roses, but I just want to see a little bit more grit, especially out of their defense. I think I'm okay with what I'm seeing in the offense. They could be better. They're missing their top receiver. He's out for the season. So maybe they're not as explosive as they were at the beginning of the season, but they're still able to score. We don't have a problem with being able to score. So the Giants don't have a problem with being able to score anymore. The issue is they cannot stop the run to save their life. If you want to beat the Giants, just run the ball. It's crazy. You can run 300 yards on them. If that's all you did, they cannot stop the run. That's a big issue for them. If they don't figure it out, it's going to be a major problem. And I don't know what kind of system Shane Bowen is doing. I don't really like it. I don't think it fits the personnel, like I said before. And he's not utilizing Abdul Carter enough. And as far as I can see, I think if this defense keeps being a problem throughout this season, they keep playing poorly on the run defense, Joe Shane probably going to be fired because he drafted all these players and he brought in all these players. All these assets, all these players that the Giants have right now that were brought in to stop the run. Raheem, which is known as Dexter Lawrence, is not his pick, but he renewed his contract. All these guys, Darius Slater, yeah, I think he's Darius Slater from school he's from. But he just got drafted in the 2nd round or 3rd round this season. He was supposed to be a key run stopper. We've not seen him the whole season. You know, and Abdul Carter, you barely see him, but when you watch the game, you can see how much pressure he's bringing in. It's just that I don't think they're using him the right way. So this is Joe Shane's issue. This is his team. He constructed this team after 4 or 5 years being with a team. This is now your team. You constructed them. After 3 years, it's basically your team. So if the defense doesn't look that good, Joe Shane and Shane Bowen are both gone for sure. I think also Brian Dable, but we might see what that might turn out to be. Anyway, so for the 49ers, they needed to get right win for themselves so they can get back on their winning momentum again and try to stack up more wins to get to the playoffs. They needed this kind of, I would say, is an easy win. Unfortunately, it is an easy win on their calendar. It's, even though no win is guaranteed in the NFL, this one versus the Giants, they were like, well, this team's not that great. We can beat them. We have better personnel. Maybe not talent wise, but at least experience wise, they're a better team, right? And they're a better coached team as well. Sure. So they needed to get this easy win, which they came in and did. You could see they kind of played it a little bit safe in the way they were, in the plays they were calling, but they got the win and they needed because next week they're playing the Rams and the Rams are coming for revenge. The Rams want to get revenge for their earlier season loss to the 49ers. And 49ers are currently 6-3. If they lose against the Rams, they're 6-4, and that's in conference. It counts against them, and they tend to play pretty well against the Rams, but the Rams, I think, are a better team. And so I think the Rams will be better prepared to steal a win from them this time. And they're in. So, I mean, it's even though they're in LA, San Francisco is a California team. So it's also still kind of home field for them in terms of their fans. But I don't know. I don't know if they can win, they can beat the Rams this time. Because I feel like the Rams will be ready for them. And they're at home. However, the coaches are rivals. That's McVay and Shannon. They're rivals. They're buddies, but they're also rivals. Come from the same coaching tree. They know how each other plays, and they play very well against each other. And Shannon seems to have a way of finding a way to win against McVay. But I think that McVay is not going to squander this opportunity to get a win back for his team. So I don't see them winning, but they needed this win to kind of like get themselves back. So even if they don't win next week against the Rams, in week 10 against the Rams, they can still have a good shot at the playoffs because they can stack up wins later on. And plus they have one of the easiest schedules for the season. So anyways, next game is the Vikings at Detroit. And like I said before, the Vikings rated Detroit for a win. Did they succeed? That's what we're going to pay a lot. All right, we're back. You're still on the Sideline NFL edition, and this is week 9 in review. We're going to talk about the Vikings at the Rams. Very straightforward. Well, I expected the Vikings would go in rating and then get their butts whooped, but that's not how it turned out. They actually didn't. It was a bit of an upset, but it is somehow expected because it's a major rivalry. But anyway, let's look at the big storylines of this game. The NFC North. Major rivalry. Vikings and Detroit are in the NFC North. They know how each other play, and they play each other pretty hard. So this is a major rivalry for them, and it matters to both of them because it's in conference. And in conference matters a lot because if you lose a lot of in conference games and you still have a winning record, you may not make it to the playoffs. So each team really needed this win, especially the home team. Detroit, still huge favorites to win at home because they have a better roster. They're a better team. They have team members who played with each other longer, and there's not much change except for the coaches, the the coordinators. There's not much change in the team, so they played better with each other. And then the other question was, how will J.J. McCarthy play now that he's had time to observe and shadow the other Carson Wentz? How will he play now that he's had time to shadow Carson Wentz on the bench for the last couple of weeks? So that's the other question that we were looking at. Well, the thing is, he didn't play that great, but he didn't lose the game. So he started out a little bit rusty. He was able to eke out a win for the Vikings. The Vikings won 27-24. That's why I said they went to Detroit rating for a W, and they got it. And it was a big upset because Detroit, again, home field, home team, and better team was expected to win. So most of the bookies, check them out on the gambling circuits, they had Detroit winning this game at least by 4. points because the Vikings offensive line is not that great this season. And then the Vikings are not extremely good because they have a one key issue with obviously their quarterback in JJ McCarthy. He's still a bit green, right? The general game was pretty good defensive showing on both parts. So both teams' defenses were on their A game. Well, mostly this game. Vikings a little bit more. Both teams combined for 10 sacks, so they got 5 apiece. Detroit 5, Vikings 5. So they got a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. And JJ McCarthy, he had happy feet actually towards the end of the game because he was always getting pressure from the Vikings. All those exotic blitzes Brian Flores puts out there for people was crazy. The Vikings did score and they led the game from the beginning and they kept that lead till the end of the game. Thanks to their defense, they were able to get turnovers in certain key spots. And then obviously JJ McCarthy executed. He managed the game fairly well. He did make some mistakes. He's still a little green, like I said, but he managed the game fairly well, and he was able to help his team get into the end zone. And I think he just didn't try to do too much, which is key about managing the game. They had a stronger running game in this game. They were able to run against Detroit, and I think it's because Aaron Jones is back from injury, and his style of running is more slasher style, is very quick. Even though he's old, he can still, make really good cuts, and he's quite elusive in terms of what he can do, right? So being able to run the ball was a big thing for them, and it helped JJ McCarthy not put the game in his hands too much to make big plays. If they did, they probably would have lost. JJ McCarthy also used his legs pretty well to move the chains, and he had a key touchdown run sometime in the. Look at some of the key stats. Passing yards, JJ McCarthy, he was 14 of 25, 143 yards passing. Not great. 14 of 25 is like pushing 50%. You want to be around 60. But I think, again, like I said, he didn't try to do too much. He threw for 2 touchdowns, and then he also threw for an interception. A little mistake, but again, he's green. First year, really, for JJ McCarthy. Let's see if he improves. I think that's what they're hoping he'll do. And the good thing is he kind of knows how he's always around winning teams, and he kind of has the vibe of trying to be a winner. Let's see how that translates in the NFL as it goes on. But he did okay in this game. He did not do too badly where it was a decent game manager. So that was a good thing. And I think that's what he should start him at and then move him on from there. Jared Goff was 25 of 37, 284 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. What happened with the Lions later on is they were actually making a comeback in the late third quarter, early fourth quarter, but the Vikings defense was just able to make plays. So they didn't allow Goff much breathing room. On the receiving end, Sam Laporta was the lead receiver for the Lions. He had 6 receptions for 97 yards and 1 touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a good day, quiet in terms of touchdowns. He usually has a touchdown each game, but he had 9 catches for 97 yards. Still moved the sticks, but he wasn't able to score a touchdown, which is usually what he's an expert at. Jameson Williams had 4 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown, which was pretty good. There are no receiving yards really worth the while on the Vikings because JJ didn't throw the ball a lot. They ran the ball more. So rushing stats, Aaron Jones had 9 carries for 78 yards. And he had some pretty good runs. As you can see, he was efficient with the ball when he ran it. And then David Montgomery on the Lions side was the lead rusher for the Lions. He had 11 carries for 48 yards, 1 touchdown. He was more like grinding the ball, trying to burst through. But the Vikings didn't. They weren't allowing them to do anything. In fact, they kind of shut down Montgomery. They shut him down completely. Jameer Montgomery, and that's a big thing. On the defensive side, I want to give a shout out to Vikings linebacker Eric Wilson. He was just, he was playing like his hair was on fire today, and he had 2 sacks for that. I think he had 7 tackles. I think he had a forced fumble. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. But he played pretty well, and he was one of the reasons why their defense was dominant. The Vikings. Closing thoughts and implications for the teams in this game. So let's start with the notion that who is now the king of the North. So this is the NFC North, huge rivalry. The teams that are there are Chicago, Green Bay Packers, the Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings, and then also Detroit Lions. And this is a very, very tough conference. Most of the teams in this conference have winning records. The Vikings are the worst. They have a 4-4 record. But I mean, this is a huge rivalry for both the Lions. This was a huge rivalry game, both the Lions and the Vikings. They play it pretty tough. The Lions, though, should have won this game. They should have found a way to win. Because this is a home game and it doesn't get the next game the Lions are playing is easier. That's the Commanders. The 2 games after that are not as easy. But I think they'll be motivated to play the next game against the Commanders, even if it's at the Commanders, because also the Commanders are kind of wonky. But I'll get to that in a second. For the Vikings, this puts their season back on track. It gets them looking like playoff contenders, and right now they're 3-2 in the division, which is sitting okay, not well. The worst team in the division, I think, is Chicago Bears. They still have a winning record of 5-4, but they are 1-4 in the conference. So they're above the Vikings are above them, and if they, try to stay above them, they might make the playoffs and may make the wild card maybe. But with this win, they still stay on the to making the playoffs. So it's a good win for them. It's a good steal, actually. And their playoff picture is still looking shaky with a 4-4 record, but you just stack wins, man. You get wins where you can in the NFL, and you try to keep pushing it forward. The Vikings are playing the Ravens at home. Again, like I said, the Ravens could steal that game, but it could go either way. Versus the Bears, they have a better chance of beating the Bears in week 11. In week 10 versus the Ravens, it's a little iffy. They can still win this game if their defense just plays lights out and then they run the ball and then McCarthy doesn't make any big mistakes. But yeah, they could win that game. They could definitely win the game against the Bears, but because it's an in-conference game and these in-conference games are more testy, it still could go either way. But their defense has to play lights out. Their defense has to carry them to the playoffs. That's what I believe. For Detroit should have won this game, like I said. Next week they're in DC playing the Commanders. This is a revenge game for Detroit. Revenge against the Commanders beating them in the NFC playoffs. So they kicked them out of the NFC Championship game. So they were in the game before the NFC Championship, and then the NFC Championship, the Commanders played the Eagles, where the Eagles beat them up a little bit. But yeah, that was an unexpected game. Everybody thought that Detroit was going to win that game, and then everybody wanted to see Detroit versus the Eagles in the NFC Championship. So this is their revenge game against the Commanders. And the Commanders are really weak now. Again, it's the NFL. Anything can happen, but they should be able to win this game. As much as I like Marcus Mariota, he's not Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is a player, he's a playmaker and quarterback. Marcus Mariota hasn't been that since his second year in the league, so he can get a win. Again, like I said, it's the NFL. Anything can happen, especially if you're playing at home. But, I expect the Lions to win this game. They're going to take this as their get right. They need to stack up that win. I believe their record right now, the Lions, they've lost 3 games and they're 5-3. So yeah, they got to win this game. They got to win it. All right. So that's it for the Lions versus the Vikings. The Vikings raid and get that W. We'll be right back and we'll be talking about the Colts versus the Steelers. You're going to like this one. We're back to the fourth game. Fourth game is Colts versus the Steelers. This is Sideline NFL Edition, Week 9 in review. And my name is Andrew Scott. This was where I said, if you remember my headline, the Steelers steal a W in the Midwest. Now, the Indianapolis Colts are in the Midwest, so that's why I use that. I mean, if you can't get the reference, don't worry about it. It's nerd talk from me. But anyways, some of the big stories here were big questions, big stories. Can the Steelers steal a win at home against the Colts, who are very, very strong? Right now, the Colts have an excellent offensive line, excellent running back, very good, very hot quarterback, Indiana Jones, or Daniel Jones, we call him Indiana Jones. And they have a pretty decent defense, not great, but pretty decent, a bit leaky on the defensive backfield side with their cornerbacks and D-backs, but they have pretty good pass rush and very good linebackers. So can the Steelers steal a win at home against the Colts? They may be able to. If you didn't know, if I didn't give you the answer already, if you think about it, the Steelers are a good team. Problem is they have an aging defense, but they're at home and there's a pride with them at home with their fans, right? So, but they lost last week to the Packers, I believe, at home, and so they want a revenge. And so this is their get right game against the Colts. And so the Colts came in probably thinking they would win, and I'll tell you more about it later. And how do the Steelers' defense, old defense, fare against the dominant offensive line of the Colts? So I'll tell you what, they fared very well. They had 5 sacks. The Steelers pulled off an upset at home, 27-20 against the Colts. And if you're going to pull off an upset, the best place to do it is away, where you're at the other team's home. But the easiest place to do it is at home. And so the Steelers did it. The game was generally even on both sides in the beginning. But however, the Steelers' defense stepped up out of nowhere and started making plays against the Colts. And the Colts, who have a normally uncanny offensive line, gave up about 5 sacks, 7 to 8 pressures, and 3 forced interceptions, which ever since Daniel Jones left the Giants, he has not been doing. And in this iteration of Daniel Jones, he has not been throwing picks like that. They sent him back to New York with the kind of pressure they were giving him. So anyway, the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers, and the Steelers offense was able to convert. They didn't do too much. Aaron Rodgers managed the game pretty well. So what he did is they just capitalized on the good field position that the defense gave them with the turnovers they had. And I think there was also a defensive and special teams touchdown or something like that, or almost touchdown. But the defense, they had a bunch of things. I think that they had an intercept. One of the defensive linemen had an interception, and they even sacked Daniel Jones close to his goal line. It was pretty glorious watching that game. For the Colts, they couldn't move the ball. They just couldn't convert. They could move the ball a little bit. They just could not convert it because the Steelers defense kept on making plays on them, kept on pressuring Daniel Jones at the right time. So they used very good exotic blitzes, and then it made Daniel Jones kind of confused, and he was throwing the ball all over the place. And in the long run, it paid off pretty well. I mean, again, like I said, the Colts still were able to score points, 20 points, but they just were not able to score enough, and the Steelers were able to make plays at the right time to stop them. The Steelers' defense was totally dominant at the line of scrimmage, and they completely killed Jonathan Taylor, one of my favorite running backs. They killed his 6-game streak of scoring touchdowns. He didn't score any touchdowns. As a matter of fact, I don't think he even got up to 40 yards in this game. It was 40 yards rushing. It was nuts. They made him completely irrelevant. And I also think that the Colts should have stuck with the running game in essence. I think they should have tried to do a little bit more, but they kind of left it early. But look, it is what it is. Let's look at some of the key stats here in this game. Passing stats, Daniel Jones was threw the ball 50 times. That's a lot of times to throw the ball. So, which means in this game, they didn't really believe in the running. He had 342 yards. See, he was moving the ball, but he also had 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions because he was throwing the ball so much. I think the Colts are built to run and then pass through that running. If the running game doesn't work and you have to force Daniel Jones to pass a lot, could make mistakes, and you don't want to do that, especially on better teams. You want to be able to force your will with that running game. Even if you're not getting the best yards, you want to be able to make a few first downs, some good first downs with the running game. Aaron Rodgers was 25-35 and passed for 203 yards and 1 touchdown. Didn't do much, just managed the game. I mean, if you see the amount of times he passed the ball, he wasn't gaining a lot of yards, but what was happening was essentially he just was getting short field positions, and then because of how good the defense was in certain times in the game, and then he would drive the team down to the goal line to either score with a touchdown or I believe it was mostly touchdowns. So it was pretty good, and they were able to move the ball on the ground as well. That's the Steelers. So for receiving yards, Alec Pierce of the Colts was the lead receiver in this game. He caught the ball 6 times for 115 yards. Michael Pittman, also of the Colts, caught 9 receptions for 115 yards as well. 0 touchdowns between both of them. We weren't able to score any touchdowns, unfortunately. And then also the Steelers nullified Tyler Warren. Didn't hear of him in this game. He was like he wasn't there. It was like he wasn't there. Anyway, my thoughts on this game. Let's look at what this means for the Colts. Colts look to reinforce their team now. Like I said earlier, Colts made some trades after this game because on their in the defensive backfield by picking up Sauce Gardner. They also got another edge rusher. I'm not sure what his name was, but I think they wanted to get him for depth. They felt he was a decent addition to get depth in there so they could, rotate their defensive linemen and their edge rushers a little bit more. And I believe they'll make a few more trades maybe next week because this year and next year they want to make a long playoff run. I know they want to go for it, because I think that there's a little bit of sentimentality with it because of Irsay, the owner, who just died. His family, his daughters, and the team and the organization are kind of sentimental. They really want to bring his dream forward, and he's been, for the last 8 years, he was trying to get the team to the playoffs, and unsuccessfully, unfortunately, for the last 8 years, he's not been able to do that. He wasn't able to do that before he passed away this year. All the general managers and quarterbacks he was bringing, but they're a bit. They want to beef up their defense. That's the Colts, especially on the defensive backfield, and then also stack a few people on the line as well. Their pass rush is okay. It's not terrible. It's decent, but they want to make it a little bit better by rotating more pass rushers and more defensive linemen. And this is sensible in the long, because the season's very long. And also sometimes the offense will have games like this where they're not as good as they usually are. And, the other team just is better at defending against them. Sometimes you're going to need the defense to make some plays. And so that's why they go out and get a playmaker like Sauce Gardner to be able to help them on defense, make some plays, and, win some games with the defense. Okay. And so, that's why they picked up Sauce Gardner. And that's what they're looking at for this season, because they're all in this season, probably all in next season to try to make a deep playoff run. For the Steelers, what they're doing is keeping their playoff dreams going. Now, Mike Tomlin, this could be his last season with the Steelers. He's been there forever, and he's a Super Bowl winning coach. He's never had a non-winning season. People were saying that if he didn't have a winning season this season, he'll probably definitely retire from the Steelers. But either way, I think even if he's going to leave this season, he wants to leave on that one. So he wants to take the team to the playoffs and be one of the few coaches who's never had a losing season. Mike Tomlin's a beast. He's never had a losing season. He is really a beast. So them winning this game against the Colts, or an NFC team and a strong NFC team as well, and a possible playoff competitor. They might meet them in the playoffs, but they used this game to prove to themselves that they can play against really good teams. And that's what they did against the Colts. Even though the Colts didn't play their best, but it could be the game plan that they had for the Colts. They knew how to nullify them. So this proved to them they could, play pretty well. And then look, the Steelers are the number one team, I think, in their conference, in the NFC North. The Browns are not very good. The Bengals, they're spoilers. They could make the playoffs, but Joe Burrow, their main quarterback, is not there. However, Joe Flacco is a good quarterback, and he can take them to the playoffs. There's no guarantee that they may be there. Iffy. They went from definitely might probably make it to the playoffs at the beginning of the season when Joe Burrow was not injured and healthy. Yeah, they could make it to the playoffs. It's possible, but I don't see them. I still see the Steelers as for now, the team with the stronger chance to make it in the playoffs in that conference. The next other team that could make it would be the Ravens, but the Ravens are working from a deficit right now. That makes them dangerous, because if the Steelers do play them again, the Steelers, I believe the Steelers, if they haven't played them, they would play them. The Steelers do play them again. The Steelers will definitely look over they would have to play them pretty hard, because the Ravens, if I think they're going for what they're going for, which is the playoffs, obviously, they're going to play every game like this. So, but right now, the Steelers do have the better record in that conference overall. I believe they're number one in their conference. The next team after them is the Ravens. They're 3-5. The Bengals are 3-6. The Browns are 2-6. Not likely. I don't see the Browns make. The Bengals may be able to make it. It's the NFL. Anything can happen, but they'd have to get on a really hot streak. The Ravens have a better chance of trying to make it, and especially because they're number two in their conference right now. They have a much better chance of making it to the playoffs without having a great or winning season. They could be 8-9 and make the playoffs if they finish second in the conference. They would have to go to a wild card. So I think the Ravens are likely to make it to the wild card, and then if they win that game, then they make it to the playoffs officially. But the Steelers are in pole position because they're leaders in the conference to make it to the playoffs. So they got this win. It was a statement win also for them to show that they could play with really top teams in the conference. So that's it for the Steelers versus the Colts. Next, we'll be talking about the Panthers versus the Packers. And I think there's the Panthers have a weapon called Rico Dowdle. And I'll tell you all about him when we come back, right? So stay locked. All right, we're back. So this is still Sideline NFL edition. We're reviewing week 9 of the NFL season, and we're going to talk about Panthers at the Packers. All right. Now, this was a surprising game, but we'll talk about the surprise later. All right, so here's some of the big storylines. After their impressive win against the Steelers, this game should be a standard win for the Packers. Let's find out what happened. Now, another question was, can Bryce Young step up and do something to help his team? Now, he can step up in different ways. He can probably just be a good game manager and not, throw any picks and not do anything too crazy. That also helps you win, especially if you have a secret weapon called Rico Dowdle, and that's what I'm talking about next. Can Rico Dowdle continue his rushing streak? And I think the answer to that was yes. He definitely did continue his rushing streak against the Packers, and it was glorious to see that. If you're a Packers fan, my dad's a Packers fan, and I'm sure he would not be happy if he saw how Rico was running all over his team. Anyway, let's talk about the final score. The final score was the Panthers won this game by 3 points, 16-13. The Packers only scored 13 points. This was a prime-time upset, and the Packers fumbled the bag at home. I don't understand how they did. I really don't understand. The Packers this season were supposed to be one of the top teams. They still are a top team, but they were supposed to be the premier team because they got Micah Parsons, and he was supposed to open things up for their defense and make their defense way better. They started out way better, but the last couple of games, each game you go into, you don't know what kind of team you're going to get from the Packers. They may be the team that blew out the Cowboys 2 years ago. That could be the team that shows up, or it could be the team that lost to the Panthers this week 9, which is what showed up against the Panthers. And I don't understand it because they have a much better roster than the Panthers. The Panthers just had their clock. They just knew how to play against them. The Packers did come out swinging because I believe they scored. Yeah, they scored first, but they didn't make enough offensive plays against the Panthers defense, and the Panthers defense just knew how to lock up their receivers. The Panthers were also able to control the clock by Rico Dowdle just running all over the place, and the Packers, like the Giants, don't know how to stop the run for some reason. They just don't know. But hey, if you get Micah Parsons, he's not a run stopper. He's a pressure machine. He's an edge rusher. He can't stop the run. So don't look at him to stop the run. You need to go out there and get somebody to stop the run. So I think the Packers will need to go and get somebody who can help them stop the run. They need to do what the Cowboys just did, right? Picking up someone like Quentin Johnson. I don't know if they have any picks because they gave all their picks away to Dallas to get Micah Parsons. So bet on the pass rush, but you never left anything for the running defense, right? And this is not the first game that they've had teams run over them. But anyways, Rico Dowdle will probably help the Panthers get to the playoffs because they're in a very weak conference, which is called the NFC South. And if they just don't, all they got to do is keep running the ball because Rico Dowdle is hot right now, and their offensive line is hot with him. And Bryce Young doesn't need to do too much. Throw the ball every once in a while, do play action every once in a while, manage the game, just run that ball until they stop you. until they stop you from running the ball, then you can open it up and start passing again, try to win the game later. But always start by running the ball. That is your secret power. Micah Parsons was not a factor in this game at all. Matter of fact, I think he only had like 2 tackles. He didn't have a sack this game, which is odd because he usually gets a sack or half a sack, but he was totally nullified because they ran the ball, because the Panthers ran. Once the Panthers run the ball, listen, Micah Parsons can't do anything. He's not very good at stopping the run, okay? So they came in knowing, let's just run at Micah Parsons. Pretty good plan. That's probably what they did. I'm not sure. Maybe they ran to his side some and they ran to the other side. But the Packers are not very good at run defense right now. And that's how the Panthers were able to beat up the clock and win this game. That's what it looked like. And then also Panthers defense played above what they were supposed to. And they really locked down the receivers of the Packers. Another thing, I think the Packers, they run the ball enough, but I feel like they should really, really lean into it. Like have all their passing game come through through running the ball. Do something like what the Colts are doing. So they have a bunch of different runners outside of Jonathan Taylor. They have design runs for the quarterback. They also have other running backs that can come in and fill in and take some snaps from Jonathan Taylor. Run the ball with your running back, with Josh Jacobs, man. Josh Jacobs is a solid running back. He can carry that ball 26 times. Then you have other running backs on your team that can come and relieve him if he's not getting anywhere. Mix it up. Use a couple of different types of runners in the beginning. See how the teams react, and then you do some play action, and then you do some passing. Some more passing. Build into the passing as the game goes, but start with the run, right? And have those explosive plays with the passing game. Grind the defense, wear the defense down with the run. I think they're good enough for the run that they should really try to do that. Josh Jacobs is one type of runner. They need to have, I think they do have other types of runners, and they need to include them in that game. Anyway, let's look at some of the key stats. Passing stats, Bryce Young, he only threw the ball 11 times, 11 of 20 times, and he only threw the ball for 102 yards. He had one pick. Leave that one pick, it was negligible. He just was a good game manager, and that's what he was asked to do, and that's what he did. Jordan Love was pass happy, as usual, with the Packers, and I think it comes from floor. They have so many receivers, they want to spread the ball out. I think you just throw the ball to the tight end and a couple of running backs and a couple of receivers, but then you run the ball early. Jordan Love, Packers, was 26 of 37 for 273 yards. He threw 1 interception. So that's a key thing you should know here. They were not able to score in the passing game, and that's not usual for the Packers. But if they are not able to do that, I think they should have leaned more into the run. I'm going to keep saying that. Rushing stats, Rico Dowdle, 25 carries, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs, 17 carries, 87 yards, 1 touchdown. They could have made that 27 or 28 carries, and Josh Jacobs could have probably won this game for them. Receiving stats, Romeo Doubs of the Packers, 7 receptions for 91 yards, no touchdown. Christian Watson, 2 receptions for 58 yards, no touchdown. Pretty good reception yards, but no touchdowns in this game. Defensive stats, the one defensive player that I really want to give a shout out to was the former Giant Xavier McKinney. I'm sorry that we ever traded you. We should have paid you your $25 million, so you could have stayed with us. He had 9 tackles and he had the 1 interception against Bryce Young. Currently has 735, so he's like 200 and something away from 1,000. And I think he's probably on pace to have 1,600 yards. I don't know how many interceptions Xavier McKinney has. I think he has 4. For the season, or 3. That's still pretty good for a safety, and it seems to be his specialty for this team. Anyways, let's look at some of the implications for both teams, and I'm going to run through this. Packers blew it. They dropped the bag. They blew an easy win they could have had in their home turf. It doesn't get much easier for them after this. Let's look at their schedule. Their next game is against the Eagles. That's not an easy game at all, and they could easily lose that game. They're 5-2-1. They could easily be 5-3-1, even though they're at the top of their conference, which is the NFC North. I think that's just happenstance. That's just really happenstance, to be honest with you. I think that they should have got this win so that they could afford to lose against the Eagles. So yeah, they're playing the Eagles. Luckily, the Eagles are going to their home, so there's still a chance they could win this game. They're good enough to beat the Eagles, but the Eagles seem to be quite serious now. However, the NFL, they could win. They have a good team against them. And if they're listening, maybe they'll start trying to run the ball a little bit more instead of trying to pass all the time. They could try to run the ball a little bit more to add something. Okay, they have an easy win against the Giants in Week 11, so I'm not going to say nothing about that. They could win the Eagles game and stack up 2 wins in Week 10. That's this coming week, and then 11, which is next week, and then the week after that, they're playing the Lions again at Detroit. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to win that game because this is a revenge. The Lions lost to them beginning of the season. The Lions are going to want to get payback. Plus, the Lions want to finish top of that conference. So they're the ones who are fighting for the top of that NFC North Conference. So they blew it. They should have won it. And I think that they need to run that ball a little bit more efficiently. They need to find it. They need to go out and get a lineman, trade for a lineman somehow. You know, if you're going to go for it for the next in this season and next season, there's no need to look at future past that. It's this season and next season or nothing, right? After that, if Matt LaFleur doesn't make a deep playoff run, he's gonna have to, they're gonna have to fire him and get somebody else and start all over. Now, the Panthers have a secret weapon, like I said, is Rico Dowdle. Funny enough, was a running back for the Cowboys last season. He did pretty well. He's showing himself to be a premier running back, and I'm really surprised because I didn't know him before last year, but he's looking pretty good. And I think that's what they should just do because their conference is the NFC South. The main player in that conference is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm discounting the Atlanta Falcons, even though they have a very good team. They're too inconsistent, right? And I don't think they're going to make any of the playoffs this year because they're 3-5 now. They lose games they shouldn't lose. It's so confusing. So I'm just going to say that at this point, because the Panthers are 5-3, they could make the playoffs. And I was saying at the beginning of the season that the way their roster looked, they were a dark horse for me to make the playoffs. They could easily beat the Bucks on a weird day, and they could definitely go toe to toe with the Falcons, even on the Falcons' good day. Falcons may beat them on their good day, but they could still go toe to toe with them on there, and then they could beat a good team on a bad day for that good team. So I think that they can definitely make the playoffs, and their conference is easy. Their next game is against the Saints. I believe they will win. They will win that game. There's no reason why they shouldn't win that game. The Saints are an NFC South team, so it's rivalry. They know each other better, but I still think they can win, even though it's going to be tough. So I like what I see with them. And if they just use Rico Dowdle, for the most part, they can make it to the playoffs. Keep running the ball until somebody completely stops them. When they stop them, then yeah, you have a backup plan. All right, the next game is same old movie, Chiefs versus the Bills. I'll tell you what happens when we come back. All right, we're back. This is Sideline NFL Edition, Week 9, and my name is Andrew Scott. We are now going to talk about the Chiefs versus the Bills. I'm going to run through this because this is the same old movie we see all the time. Key storylines here. This is rivalry alert, Chiefs versus Bills. Really, it's Mahomes versus Allen because everybody keeps comparing them, blah, blah, blah. We know what it is. And the Chiefs are sitting third place in their division, which they haven't been for a while. AFC West is now it's probably the most competitive conference, or the second most competitive conference in the league. Second most difficult, definitely. And the Chiefs this year have a very difficult schedule. So their NFL is definitely trying to make it interesting by making them play a lot of tough teams away, not at home, but away. Because at home, Chiefs usually win, whether it's a tough team or not, right? But away, they could lose, right? And they have a lot of those away games where they can lose. So the thing about it is, one of the key things here is another key issue is, when the Bills meet the Chiefs in the regular season, that game doesn't matter except for the rivalry between Mahomes and Allen. And usually the Bills will win that game, even at Arrowhead. Sometimes they win that game at Arrowhead. But when it comes time to the playoffs, completely different story. The Chiefs beat them all the time. So this game doesn't matter to me. I, as a neutral, Even as a fan of Mahomes and Allen, it doesn't matter to me. I want to see them at the playoffs, and I want to see Allen beat Mahomes once. It's getting boring. This game doesn't matter because each time, the Bills show up and do well, and when it comes time to playoffs, they can't beat the Chiefs. Anyways, so the final score was Chiefs 21, Bills 28. No surprise, the Bills won, and it was in Buffalo. And we've seen this film all the time. This game doesn't matter. I've told you that. All right, the Bills led most of the game and just stuck to it. Their defense did pretty well in keeping Mahomes caged. They cut off his running lanes because usually he run, especially this last 2 seasons, he's become a runner a lot. But the Chiefs were making a comeback late third quarter. However, it wasn't enough and they ran out of time. Why they run out of time? I'll tell you why. Because of a guy called James Cook, the running back for the Buffalo Bills, who's their new secret weapon, who just eats up the clock. This dude ran for 114 yards, and that's how you play football, my friends. Josh Allen didn't have to do too much. He just threw the ball where he needed to throw, just to move the chains every once in a while if they couldn't make any gains on the ground, which sometimes happens. You then do a play action or another short pass, and then you get a first down, you move the chains. Josh Allen only ran the ball 6 times for 19 yards, and those were short runs, and he scored 2 touchdowns. But yeah, James Cook carried most of the weight, so he was grinding the ball down. Now he's not that kind of big back; he's more of a slasher back, very quick on his feet, he can make crazy cuts, and then he's also very good at taking it to the house. He's quick enough to take it to the house. He has enough pace. And so the Bills just ran the ball to run down the clock and keep Mahomes on the sidelines. And then when Mahomes did get on there, the defense stifled him so much. But towards the third quarter, like I said, he was making a couple of plays here and there. However, he didn't throw for a touchdown, which shows a lot. Anyway, let's go to the next one. Rasheen Rice is starting to take charge of the wide receiver room in Kansas City. Wideout Rasheen Rice is starting to take over as the number one receiver in KC, having and leading the team with 80 yards receiving. Also, I think last week he had a lot of yards as well. And he's looking pretty good. He's the guy that they were waiting for to make big moves during the middle of the season and the later part of the season. So he came back after having a 6-game suspension for his crazy, dangerous, stupid street racing, and then he caused the collision and he ran out. I hope he's matured from that, but it's good to have him back on the team, however stupid what he did. So the top receiver for the Bills was Dalton Kincaid, and he is showing himself to be a top pass catcher for Josh Allen, and he's on pace to have 800 receiving yards, which is major for a tight end. Dalton Kincaid made a statement. He had 101 yards and 1 touchdown this game. Now, the Bills' defense was very effective against KC by putting Mahomes under a lot of pressure and also cutting off his running lanes. They didn't want him to run anywhere. They really didn't want him to go anywhere. They were like, nah, we like you right where we can see. They put spies all over him. He wasn't able to go anywhere. And they sacked him a couple of times as well. I think like 3 times. Joey Bosa was a major part. He's become a major key part of the Bills defense now since he came over from the Chargers early this year. So let's look at the key stats. Allen threw the ball 26 times and completed 23 of those 26 passes for 273 yards and 1 touchdown. So he threw the ball often enough, but he threw it to his tight end, which they weren't covering properly, which is how I think you should do it. And then he also, threw it to some of his running backs and other wide receivers, but mainly to his tight end. And then he was very efficient with the ball. 23 of 26, very, very efficient. That's almost like 89% or 90%. Mahomes, on the other hand, was 15 of 34, so he was below 50%. All that pressure, he was throwing the ball away. He had a lot of forced incompletions. And he also threw an interception. He was 15 of 34 for 250 yards. He did get himself together towards the latter, third quarter of the game. But by that time, it was too late. And he was also sitting on the sidelines a lot because the Bills were keeping him there with the way they were moving the chains. Then key rushing stats. James Cook, like I said, had 114 rushing yards on 27 carries. No touchdowns, unfortunately, but still pretty good game. I think this is his third game straight with 100 plus yards. Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's what I read. He's on a streak, definitely. Then top rusher for Kansas City today was Kareem Hunt with 11 carries for 45 yards and one touchdown. Kareem Hunt, Mr. Old Reliable, doing very well since he moved over from the Browns back to his home base, which is in Kansas City. Receiving stats for this game, Racine Rice for the Kansas City 49ers had 4 receptions for 80 yards. Dalton Kincaid for Buffalo Bills had 6 receptions for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Hollywood Brown for Kansas City, 2 receptions for 73 yards. Travis Kelce had 4 receptions for 66 yards. And then big shout out to a couple of the defenders on the, not to say that KC didn't have pretty good defensive plays, but these guys on the Bills did pretty well today. Joey Bosa, 3 tackles and 1 sack, 1 QB hit. Casey Benford, or C. Benford, I believe he's also a defensive tackle. He had 3 tackles, and 1 sack. Also putting that pressure on Mahomes. They did pretty well today. What does this mean for these two teams? Now, for the Bills, this win is a win. It's an AFC win. It's a good win. Outside of that, it doesn't mean anything else. Screw the rivalry. When that matters, that only really, really matters for most people now in the playoffs. Okay? The rivalry, it's great, it's fun, it's entertaining, it's hype. It doesn't matter. But it's a good AFC win for the Buffalo Bills. They'll take this into their next game against the Dolphins, which they should win, even though it's at home, and the Dolphins will play them pretty tough, even the Dolphins played them pretty tough, earlier in the season at their home. So this is the second leg. They still should win this game. If they don't win this game, no harm, no foul. There is a foul, though, because then they would drop out of being the leaders in the conference and cede that to the Patriots. So they want to get this win versus the Dolphins. It's important so they can have poll points and be the leaders of their conference and get a bye into the playoffs, right? Now the Chiefs have a bye week. They need this bye week because they need to kind of like recoup themselves, because the next game they're playing is versus conference rivals, the Denver Broncos. That is a big, big game. Denver Broncos are currently the leaders of the conference. If they don't win that game, they need to win that game because they're currently third in their conference, and they need to stack up some wins in that conference. So, it'd be good if they beat the Broncos, their division rivals. This is going to be a very tough game, a difficult one. I would usually pick the Chiefs. However, this season it's not automatic. And like I said, the Broncos are division leaders, and they're division leaders for a reason. They've got an incredible defense. The Chiefs have a tough way to go, but they've done it before. They did it the last time they won the Super Bowl in 2020. Nobody thought that they would go on the road and beat all the teams they did and beat the Ravens at home at the Ravens and go to the Super Bowl that way. They find ways, but it's not automatic like it was before. Conference has changed. They also have a tougher schedule this season, so they might be a bit more beat up. All right. When we come back, we'll look at the Cardinals playing at the Cowboys in Dallas. This is a fun one, and when we come back, we'll talk about it. So stay locked. All right, we're back. Cardinals at the Cowboys, and this is going to be fun. So let's start with the big storylines. Kyler Murray, the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals for the last 4 or 5 years, has been benched for Jacoby Brissett, the journeyman, and it's because Jacoby Brissett seems to have figured out how to use the player or play better with the pieces that he has. The offense is looking better under Jacoby Brissett. It could be temporary. Maybe Kyler Murray gets himself back as the season goes along, and Brissett starts showing why he's a journeyman and he takes his position back. But for now, he's the starting quarterback according to the coach. And then also another thing is, what crazy catch will NFL young boy George Pickens do in this game? I hope he does something cool. So let's see what happens. Look at the final score. The final score, Cardinals 27, Cowboys 17. The Cardinals went to Dallas and beat the boys. I'm happy about that. I love it when they beat the boys. Cowboys suck. Just kidding. Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. I hate the Cowboys. I do like Pickens. I like Pickens. I do like CD Lamb. I like the players. I just don't like the team. So I'm always happy when they lose. Journeyman Jacoby Brissett has found a way, found a new home, and has found a way to help his new team stack up some wins. So this is the second win in a row for actually, it's not the second win in a row. The last game, they played the last team. They played very closely, but this is a win, and they've been improving ever since he came in as starting quarterback 2 or 3 games ago. So Jacoby Brissett is looking very good. He came in initially because Kyler Murray was injured, but the team has looked much more vibrant. They're able to do a lot more, open up the passing tree, things like that. So he's looking pretty good. Guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., they're starting to look a lot better because they have, somewhat competent quarterback play with them. That doesn't mean Kyler Murray's not a good quarterback, but he works better with certain kind of players because he's such a mobile quarterback. And he's short, so he can't see it. He doesn't make a lot of plays in the middle of the field, so he has to always run out and try to pass and move. So you always have to keep moving if you're his receivers, and some receivers don't work exactly. They don't work best with that kind of quarterback. So I think that Jacoby Brissett is doing giving them that option that is a little bit better. And so that's why Marvin Harrison Jr. has been performing pretty well over the last 2-3 games. Yeah, he got a critical, nice pass catch against one of the Cowboys defenders for a touchdown. It was really, really nice. Yeah, Marvin Harrison can now start being the player he was all hyped up to be from coming out from college. The Cowboys started out pretty slow, but they tried to battle back. They did battle back, but however, Arizona's defense is a lot better than they used to. They really, really put the screws on and pressure on Dak Prescott. They didn't allow CeeDee Lamb or NFL young boy George Pickens score any touchdowns. They caught yards. They gave them the underneath stuff, but they didn't let them get in the end zone. So it was kind of they shut them out, man. They just shut them out. They found a way to shut them out, and then they inflicted the necessary pain on offense because they were able to move the ball. Key statistics. Let's look at the passing yards. Jacoby Brissett was 21 of 31 for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dak Prescott was 24 of 39 for 240 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Key rushing stats. Javonte Williams still running pretty well behind the offensive line of the Cowboys, 15 carries for 83 yards, no touchdown. And DeMarcado, running back from the Cardinals, who actually I think DeMarcado is a second-year running back. I can't remember which school he came from, but he was thought of pretty highly when he came out of college. And this year he's doing pretty well and covering up for my guy Connor, who's still injured, and I don't know, it doesn't look good. But I love Connor. He's a great running back. I like his style of running, but DeMarcado is doing pretty well. So 2 games in a row, he's run for over 60 yards. This game, he ran for 14 carries. He had 14 carries for 79 yards. Receiving stats: Marvin Harrison Jr. 7 receptions for 96 yards, 1 touchdown. M. Wilson 3 receptions, 61 yards. Michael Wilson 3 receptions for 61 yards. And McBride, tight end from Arizona, 5 receptions, 55 yards. 0 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, 7 receptions and 86 yards, 0 touchdowns. Pickens, 6 receptions, 79 yards, 0 touchdowns. I'll tell you what, though, the Cowboys receivers are still the best duo that there is currently in the league. They can still inflict pain on you, and that's why I think I salute the Arizona Cardinals for having this kind of game plan against against them. Sorry, I have allergies, so if you hear that stuff, it's kind of some allergic stuff going through. But yeah, they did a pretty good job shutting him down and not letting him in the end zone because these guys are good at getting in the end zone and they're expert weapons, man. That's CD Lamb and George Pickens. Anyway, let me look at the final thoughts on this game and what it means for each team. Arizona has a has started building a run of good form. Okay, so they just need to keep this up. And it's funny in the NFC West, you could finish last in the NFC West, depending on how all the other NFC teams are. Could finish last in the NFC West and still make it to the playoffs. I've seen it happen twice for Arizona, right? If you finish last in the NFC West and finish 8-8 or 9-6, you could still make it to the playoffs. All the wild card, wild cards before the playoffs. It is a playoff. I consider it a playoff. You make it to the wild card, you make it to the playoffs. But it's kind of like an elimination for the teams that didn't clear the standard bar, right? So they're giving one team in those wild card brackets a chance to be able to make it to the playoffs. So you could conceivably do that, and I think Arizona, if they get a fairly good run of form, they can still make it. However, it's not looking good in their conference because their conference is so tough. They have the 49ers, the Rams, and the Seahawks, and all those teams have winning records currently, and they all have fairly good rosters. Very good rosters. So it'll be difficult, but it's possible if they get a run of form, and especially if Brissett's, he has the hot hand. Now for the Cowboys, what Cowboys needed this win. It's a tough one not to have, especially when you're at home. However, this win it only gets tougher for the Cowboys because they have a tough schedule because they have a lot of away games against tough teams starting from week 10. It's in fact the last 5 games or last 6 games of the season. I think last six or seven, last 6 games of the season are really bad. Some of those games are games against in conference, so those could go either way, to be honest. NFC East, but the other games are winning teams with winning records, and you're going away to their own home field. It's going to be pretty difficult. So they need to try to stack up some wins. However, they can take a win away from us, the Giants, possibly. But the Giants will want revenge, and it's in conference, so it's going to be very tough. But they could take a win against the Commanders, especially if Jaden Daniels is not back by the time they play the Commanders. They could steal a win away from the Commanders. It's very possible, especially if Jaden is not back by then. I'm hearing that he might not be back till late in the season, if at all. Anyway, look, there's still a path for them to make the playoffs and also come second in the NFC East Conference. If they come second, then there's a high chance that they will make it to the wild card or make it to the playoffs straight. So there is a path for them to do that. However, the away games they have from for the last 6 weeks in the season are the sticking points. They have to try to upset one of those teams that they're playing at, and I'm not sure what those teams are in front of me, but they have to try to win one of those games. However, they have a bye right now, and when they come back in week 11, their matchup is against the Raiders. They can win that game. They should be able to win that game. Although it's the NFL, nothing is guaranteed, but they should be able to win that game. All right, when we come back, we'll close it out with the other games that I'm not going to go into details about, but the other games happened in week 9, and we'll just go over them really quickly. And then after that, that's it for the episode. So stay locked. All right, we're back. All right, so this is Sideline NFL Edition, Week 9. We're about to close up. We're going to look at the other games that I didn't go into too much detail about. I'm just going to go over a few things, scores, and a little bit of stats, and I'm not going to go into too many other things. We'll go really quickly into it. So Seahawks versus the Commanders, or Seahawks at Commanders, it was 38-14. Seahawks win. Sam Darnold was 21 of 24, 330 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, super efficient. Jaden Daniels was 16 of 22, 153 yards, one interception. He got injured. He injured his knee, I believe, or yeah, I believe it was his knee. And the unfortunate thing is that he rushed back right to come. I think they rushed him back out of injury. Maybe they shouldn't have done that. Maybe they should have set him out this game against Seattle and just brought him back. But hey, whatever. He's injured and he's out almost to the late part of the season, if not for the whole season. Jackson Smith and Jigba, a top receiver for this game, 129 yards on 8 receptions. And look, the Seahawks are looking like they might win the NFC West. They're looking like the top dogs, but I still have a feeling the Rams are going to win the NFC West. They're still a very tough team. All right, next game is Jaguars at Raiders, 30-29. Jaguars eke out a win against the Raiders. This was a very good game by the Raiders. It seems Geno Smith has kind of got his form back a little bit. He's not just throwing and wailing, he's not pick city, you know what I'm saying? And I like the fact that, his coach, Coach Carroll, just kind of let him work through that. Anyway, Geno Smith played fairly well, 29 of 39 for 284 yards and 4 touchdowns with 1 interception. However, I think they should run the ball more, Las Vegas. You got a top first rounder running back. You should run the ball more. Brock Bowers came out of I don't know. He's been kind of quiet this season, although he's still catching passes every once in a while. But this is the first 100-yard game I've seen him have this season. I could be wrong. He had 12 receptions for 127 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did very, very well. Travis Etienne, 24 carries for 84 yards rushing. And Trevor Lawrence, the cool guy, the guy who doesn't really care about football that much, but who's finally showing his potential, 23 of 34 for 220 yards and 1 touchdown, and he ekes out a win for the Jaguars in this game. Jaguars look like they are top hole of the NFC. No, they're not. NFC South, they're top of the conference, and I think the Jaguars are 5-2. They're doing pretty good. They can make the playoffs. They just have to go through the Texans first. The Texans are going to start stacking up. Okay, next game. Saints at the Rams, and the Rams destroyed the Saints. Well, not destroyed. They beat the Saints convincingly, 34-10. Rams win at home. Matt Stafford was great with the pigskin, throwing 24 of 32 for 281 yards and 4 touchdowns. Kieran Williams carried the ball for 25 times for 114 yards and 1 touchdown. Puka Nacua was not silent either. He caught the ball 7 times for 95 yards and 1 touchdown. Nacua is just a beast. That trio, they're really good. It's unfortunate Matt Stafford's so old, and also Devontae Adams is also so old. They might have 2 more years, but looking pretty good. They're looking pretty solid. We're going to go to the next game. Bears at Bengals. This was a great one. This was a shootout. Bears win this game 47-42. Caleb Williams throws the ball 34 times, completes 20 of 34 for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not bad. Kyle Monangai came out of nowhere. Rookie running back. I believe he's out of Temple. Yeah. He carried the ball 26 times for 176 yards, and they've been talking about getting him more involved to give a different dynamic to the running game. They wanted to have DeAndre Swift be more of the slasher back and receiving back, and then him more of the power third down back, bruiser back. So Monangai is showing his things. That's not a small feat. 26 carries for 176 yards. No touchdowns though, which is weird. Colston Loveland, I thought he was a bust, but apparently he's not. He caught the ball 6 times for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. I was even laughing. I was saying that the Bears picked him over Tyler Warren, and look at what Tyler Warren's doing every day. So the week that Tyler Warren has a quiet week, Colston Loveland explodes, which shows you what I know about football. Nothing. Flacco, old man Flacco, still throwing the pigskin, man. He throws the ball 47 yards, completes it 31 times, and he throws out 470 yards of passing offense for 4 touchdowns, and obviously he's going to throw picks. He's Joe Flacco, but that's pretty good. This is a far cry from what he was with the Browns. He's killing it here. Because he has weapons. And then one of those weapons is T. Higgins, who had 7 receptions for 121 yards. Now, I'm going to go through these last few ones. I'm not going to go into any more details about the stats because I got to get out of here. Chargers at the Titans. The Chargers win 27-20. Close game. I'm not going to go into any more details. You can look it up. Broncos eke out a win at Texas, 18-15. Broncos are just a solid team this season. Defense, and then they just find a way to grind it out with the offense. Pretty good, pretty good. I have to tip my hat to Sean Payton for what he's doing there. Falcons at Patriots. Patriots eke out a win at home, 23-24. You see, the Falcons played really good in this game, but that's not always the team you get. You don't know what you're going to get when you see them. They're just too inconsistent. They're like the Packers, for God's sakes. Actually, they're worse than the Packers because they have more. They make more. Anyway, that's it for Sideline NFL Edition Week 9. And my name is Andrew Scott. And hey, look, guys, I love you. Thank you for coming here. I know I'm not as consistent as I should be. I will be more consistent about the show. Promise. Now that I've moved, I've kind of gotten over my movements and stuff like that, and life's not beating me up too much. I will continue doing the show, so I hope to see you guys next week. Might be a little late next week because I'm traveling for work. So again, it's great talking to you guys, talking football. Hey, send us some mail. I don't know what our mail is. I think I'll set up our mail next week and I'll list it out on the thing. So wait to send me mail and messages there. You can swear for me if you want to. Be like, you're speaking too much English. Blah 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 blah. Come down to our level. Don't worry, you can send the mail when it's all right, guys. Adios. See y'all next week. Watch some football.